Welcome to GPS. I am J.A. LaRock. Now, I always thought that if I ended up somewhere out that was cold and I needed to survive, I'd have to do like one of those Star Wars things where, you cut open the beast and you crawl inside. I never thought of actually making a friend with a polar bear and ending up being able to do something cool. But that's actually one of the pieces of this game that we're going to be talking about today that's coming up soon from Big Cake Games. And we're happy to have Ray Willmott with us on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey there, nice to meet you all.
So, you're from the UK, correct? You're in the UK right now?
Yeah, I'm from Wales and Cardiff.
Nice. One of the great things about doing GPS is we get to talk to people like all over the world, and a lot of times, gamers, especially in the US, get US-centric, where we kind of only think about everyone here, even though we know about all types of other gamers. Could you tell us maybe if there's differences that you've noticed between gamers in the UK and maybe other places like the US?
Well, I mean, from my own experience in Wales, we're actually starting up a games industry in Wales. We've actually got some funding from the Welsh Government now. We've got our own game development show. It's its fourth year running now. So there's a lot actually going on in Wales particularly. There's a nice scene starting to develop. And certainly in the UK as well, I mean, you've got a nice gaming scene overall. I mean, obviously, Grand Theft Auto is made in the UK and other Rockstar games as well. And you've got a lot of kind of burgeoning indie scene as well. You've got Mike Biffal, who's worked on Volume, and obviously Thomas was alone. So I mean, I think from the industry, from that perspective, there are differences, but you can certainly see that they're both growing in their own ways, and they're both unique and very fresh and exciting things going on.
What was it that is appealing to you about the indie games? I mean, to me, it's kind of like anything where you have that creative freedom, even though it can be difficult because maybe you don't have that AAA backing. But what was it that really brought to you to go into indie game developing?
I think for me, indie game developing is quite fresh. I mean, you've seen a lot of great, fresh ideas coming into indie. It harkens back to a time that's sort of more familiar to me when I grew up with gaming with sort of the Commodore 64 and the Amiga. And it kind of reminds me of those sort of games that, that really sort of sparked my imagination as a child. And, you sort of whereas I know a lot of modern AAA titles like, say, COD and other such titles like that, they're great for what they are, and they produce good story, and they've got a lot going for them. But I find that creativity-wise, there's a lot more going on in the indie scene at the moment, and that interest inspires me, and wants to get me into game development.
And what about as far as your gaming background? Like, what did you grow up playing, and what was it that you really enjoyed, both on PC and consoles if you played both?
Yeah, I play all sorts of formats. I mean, growing up, I was actually talking about this with a friend before I came on the show. It's the difference between my top 20 games of all time and the games that I loved as a child. And as a child, it was certainly I was into types of games like Rodland and Turrican and Secret of Monkey Island. It's probably still one of my all-time favorite games. I grew up on quite an adventure gamers diet, really. So like a lot of the LucasArts, Sierra, and even Revolution titles were sort of my forte. But as I've grown into gaming more, I mean, I've become more familiar with RPGs and first-person shooters and basically games with a solid, good story. Really, just get me going. They're sort of the things that interest me most of all, really, because I like to understand characters. I like to kind of get a feel for their motivations and their personalities, and I like to see how they drive the story, really. And anything with a good story or a good set of characters is going to win me over, really.
And I think that's one of the great things about when you see with indie games that you have this ability to, perhaps go a little bit different than what everyone's used to. I mean, a lot of times you get, with the AAA titles, you get a lot of cookie cutter stuff, and then somebody may come along and revolutionize something, but then everyone else wants to just jump on that. It seems that with indie games you can try a lot more things, and you can have a game where you can really just say, hey, this is for people that love that deep story or someone who loves just deep puzzles. It's not like you have to try and make it for the general masses and then it waters down the game. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that with indie development at the moment, I mean, you see, it's not necessarily games with a full story either. I mean, if you look at someone like Super Meat Boy, I mean, it has got a story to it, but I mean, the core element of Super Meat Boy is how difficult it is, and it's that kind of retry element to it. It's like, oh, I've got to just do this one more time, kind of like a Dark Souls edge to it. But again, you also get some fantastic stories from indie as well. I mean, there's some recent titles. I mean, White Knight is one that's really interesting because it's got that film noir aspect to it, and again with contrast in games like that, it's very story-driven stuff. So, I mean, there's something for all audiences there, and there's something to appeal to all demographics. But certainly, I think that there's less pressure on an independent studio. They can create a game in their own time. And there's because I mean publisher pressure I think does sort of create some issues for developers in the industry, and I certainly feel that independent game development is a lot more liberating in that sense.
What was it that made you make the leap from, enjoying games, being a gamer, to actually wanting to work in the industry?
Well, I'd sort of give you a bit of background on myself first of all. I mean, I've been a gamer for basically since I was about five. But
Wow.
I actually got my start in journalism. Well, the journalism side of things. So I've been doing that for about 6 years. And I've written for a variety of sites. So I've been on VG 24/7, Games TM. I did some stints with the Sun and the Daily Mail. Set up my own website, expanded to DLC. And basically, I've been working as a bit of a freelancer and working on my own site for a while. But I actually got into the narrative design of gaming last year with a Welsh development company on a game called Ruins of Camelot. And basically, that is sort of like a match-three puzzler, and they just needed someone to do some narrative to fill in some blanks. So I thought, hey, we'll give it a shot, because I've always had, I think since growing up as well, I've always wanted to create stories, and I've always been interested in telling stories, and get hopefully someday producing a book. But it's kind of one thing led to another, and the game got shipped last year. And then I stumbled across the Big Cake guys and started working on Cold Horizon. So it's been interesting. It's been sort of a big career shift for me, but I'm enjoying the ride at the moment.
What's it like, the environment for big cake games? I think sometimes people get the impression that if you go into gaming, you're either going to be like in a place where everyone's, having fun playing games, but then, of course, there's a very serious side, especially if you're, a new company coming up. It's business as well, but it seems that, the right type of gamers, employees are able to balance that too. So, what's your experience at Big Cake Games?
I mean, they're very fresh. This is their first game under this banner. So at the moment, there's still a lot going on in terms of formalizing the team and formalizing what everyone is working on and what people are going to be doing. But I mean, everyone I've encountered so far on the team has been so creatively driven. They're very ambitious. They really want to create a great game. They're all focusing the same direction, which is fantastic. I mean, sometimes you can. With teams, sometimes people can be looking in different directions and not quite on the same page. That's certainly not the case here, and I think that in fact there seems to be quite an open environment there, where if you've got a suggestion or something, you think, oh, that could be good. That'll be taken on board, and see whether or not it will work within the context of the overall game. And I think that everyone is very creative, very ambitious, and I think that there's a real positive energy about the team, which I hope will translate in the weeks and months to come. Anyway.
Awesome. So, as far as Horizon, can you tell us about how that project came about?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Big Kick Games, but essentially they've come from the ashes of Outer Haven Games, which Outer Haven Productions, should I say, who were originally working on the Metal Gear Solid remake. And what happened was the team obviously that project didn't happen, and some members of that team have continued to stay, and some have moved on to other things. So what happened was that they started considering, when that project failed, they started looking into other things, and they looked at Cold Horizon, and that's been something they were doing in the conceptual stage. And it's basically the idea of having a polar bear and a child sort of working together and having it, discovering the world together. And I think from that as well, I mean, there was some the ideas that they had, and they just gradually put them together into this project, and gradually the Cold Horizon just started to come together really. And it's still, I think there's still some building to go, and I think there's still some development, things that we're clearing up, and things we're coming to understand. But as a base of a project, as a core of a project, it's sort of now together. We've got the basis of a full team together, and things are really starting to move along now, and it's really exciting to be a part of it actually, because you're seeing, as I said before, everyone is kind of got their own ideas and they're injected into the game, and it's gradually becoming this, moving from the paper to this amazing feel,
As
amazing idea.
as far as it's going to be a side-scrolling adventure game, and can you tell us about the interaction that you hope to players to experience between the polar bear and the child? Like what kind of things, what kind of interactions will it be?
I mean, I think the first thing to say, I mean, obviously we haven't talked about the project yet, but what I'm basically going to talk about here is quite new news, so it's not known yet. Basically, the polar bear's name is Ira, and the child is going to remain on the polar bear's back throughout. The child has these abilities, which we're not quite ready to discuss, but basically the abilities enable him to not only affect the environment, they enable him to basically have a sort of control over the polar bear. And what essentially is happening here is that the child and the bear is like a synergy. They can't be apart. They're basically one in the same. So you're not actually controlling the child through the game. You're actually controlling the polar bear. However, the child is having a direct impact on what is happening within the game as well. So, for example, I'm not going to talk too much about it, but the child's powers, they will actually change from season to season within the game, and each time there will be a lot of puzzle solving within the game, and the child's abilities will sort of directly impact those. You'll need to use the child's ability to solve those puzzles. And so, whereas the polar bear is capable of sort of like more physical, sort of running, jumping, walking, fighting. So there's a real mix of gameplay in there, but it's basically they're both working together as part of a group, but you are essentially controlling the polar bear.
So as far as the two characters, the polar bear and the child, I was reading, and just let me know if this is correct, that the polar bear basically had a master, and that it was like either abandoned or separated from the master. Do you eventually find out more about both characters, about their history, their backstory?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the bear basically is, based on what you've just said there. The bear is initially part of a feature attraction in a carnival, and from that, you kind of learn about the bear's background through flashback sequences throughout the game. There's going to be about one per act, and there's going to be a lot of there'll be a lot of interaction with both the bear and the players the NPCs within the game that that have impacted her life to that point. And to a degree, it will have a bearing on the journey to come, but also it's more to sort of tell the player, how this unity happened, how the bear has come to be in this position, and just give a feel for some illustration behind the game, so to speak.
And besides now, as far as the locations, like you said, it's going to be, desolate, snowy area, especially with a polar bear. So it's about survival. Can you tell us a little bit about the world that we'll find these two characters in? And besides the puzzle solving and just trying to, like, what aspects of survival is going to be, forefront for the game?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing to say as well is I did briefly illustrate it before that the game is actually going to be seasonal. So you're going to begin the game in the winter, then you're going to move to spring, to summer, to autumn, and then back to winter again. So there's 5 acts in the game, and each act is going to be represented by a season. So it's basically going to be the different elements of survival within those seasons, basically. But the environment is going to be post-apocalyptic. It's a different time, basically, where you've got hunters roaming around. There's going to be, like you say, it's going to be a bit for survival. But in terms of how that will work with you, I mean, obviously, like I mentioned, player will be able to fight. So there will be occasions where you'll be required to enter combat. There will also be occasions where stealth will seem a more logical solution. And again, puzzle solving will also play a big part as well. So there is a degree of that, but also, I mean, I think that we're considering some other options in terms of survival, which we're not quite ready to talk about. But there are a few things that are, you know, that are chipping through our minds at the moment. But
Now, as far as it coming out for PS4 and PC, I mean, obviously, a lot of the games that maybe people are used to when they're talking about indie games are usually used to the PC. That's not to
Hmm.
say that indie games haven't become big in the past couple of years on consoles as well. Did you find that it was more difficult to do PC and work towards the PS4, or what was the idea behind that to also make it a console game as well?
I think that a lot of independent developers are recognizing consoles now as a viable launch platform for their titles, and they want to. They'll. I think you speak to any of them, and I think that all of them will want to do anything they possibly can to bring their game to consoles as well, because they recognize that that's a large portion of the game community as well. Um, and I certainly feel that, with the power of titles like, we're actually using Unity for this game. With actually using Unity as an engine, it makes it a lot easier to basically create something on PC and then sort of port it across different platforms. It's not easy, but it's easier than perhaps it has ever been. So I think it makes it more possible to basically work in that way. I mean, obviously, I think that PC will. I don't want to sort of confirm or deny anything here, but I would imagine PC will probably launch first. That's what we're going to aim for, but hopefully we'll be able to launch them simultaneously. I mean, that's certainly what we're going to aim for. So that's what we've initially said. But certainly, I think with Unity especially, and other engines as well, it's a lot easier to make that possible now. To create simultaneous launches, or certainly to lessen the window between launching on PC and launching on console.
Can you give us an idea of maybe the timeline coming forward? I know that a lot of things are still in development. I was looking over the different rendering art and stuff that was up on different articles, and it looks pretty cool. When can we expect to see like some gameplay footage, and what are you looking forward to as far as a time for release?
Well, at the moment, we're actually working on a trailer, which we're hoping to share in the next sort of couple of weeks, which will give you a better idea of the art style of the game, and also hopefully will show you a bit of gameplay footage as well. Um, we're also actually, as you've seen with the art, we've actually tried to do as best as possible with this, and all the art you've seen is actually hand drawn, and all the art in the game will be hand drawn. So as a result of that, we are looking to and obviously the budget constraints that has created, we will be looking to launch a Kickstarter in a few weeks to sort of help with the development of the game. But we're hoping, we're still aiming for a 2015 release. Obviously, things change and with development cycles, but that's certainly the aim that we're going to push for. We're going to aim to try and release this year. But there's going to be more information on that with the Kickstarter, and basically with the website, which we've also got launching in the next week or so. So yeah, lots to come.
Awesome. All right, so we always ask anyone that we have on the show if they had to choose one classic game, PC, console, it could be old or even kind of new. What would you pick if you had one, and if you could tell us why?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to be loyal to Monkey Island. I mean, it's the game I sort of grew up with when I was about 6, and obviously they've had the remaster in recent times as well. And when I replayed it, I just realised how much it had held up, the humour and the gameplay. I think for me, it was just the original title that really made me think it was my real first WoW gaming moment, in terms of, characterization and humour and gameplay and just style and mechanics. It was everything at the time that I wanted from a game, and it's lasted with me ever since. So I think, in terms of favorite game, yeah, it would have to be Secret Monkey Island. I would probably put a slash Monkey Island 2 in there as well, but if I was really pushed, the original would be my favorite.
Hey, that's a very good choice. That's really cool. Well, definitely, this is a game that I'm interested in seeing the development and how it comes about. So I'm really interested in seeing, the trailer and more stuff from it. And especially, like once you have the website and everything up, that'll be really cool, and the Kickstarter as well. So everybody, we're going to keep up on information on this, and we'll post as soon as that information's up, and then we can put out more information so you can keep track of this as well as when the Kickstarter launches. But the game is Cold Horizon from Big Cake Games, and Ray, thanks for coming on and talking with us.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, so we'll be back very soon with another episode of the Gamer Profile Show, GPS. I'm Jay LaRock, and until next time, remember our motto: never stop gaming.